Here we go. This is all working now. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our little virtual event space. I'm Allie, and I'm in pilot mode here in our 2021 now event situation. If you're local, you probably recognize me from the LFP location, and I'm super excited to be here tonight introducing Tara Moss and Gertie Hirsch here to discuss Tara Moss's new noir thriller, The War Widow. Welcome to our first event in 2021. This is all very exciting. I'm so glad to be back. Oh my gosh, yes, here everyone's showing up. Perfect, good. So before we get to the fun stuff, I just want to really quickly thank you guys all so much for tuning in, showing up, and for buying books. Your guys' support really is what keeps this place going and what makes all of these possible. And we really love what we do. So if you guys also love what we do, we'd so appreciate it if you swing by. We are still open and grab copies. Or if you're not local, we do ship. Shipping is $3.50 per book, or for one book, and then like $1 after that. And you get to support USPS too. So, oh, and we do have signed book plates for this book for anyone who buys online. So go ahead and swing over. I will be linking these in the chat. Go ahead and purchase those. Let's see. So while you're over on the website, I definitely recommend checking out the other upcoming events that we've got. There's going to be a bunch coming up in the new season. It's a really exciting fresh list. Definitely sign up for the newsletter. It's a weekly update. I think it's like one email a week. We won't spam you, I promise. And it's just events, exciting new releases, signed copies we have copies of, and just anything that happens to be going on in the bookstore. Plus, of course, follow us on social media. We are at Third Place Books pretty much everywhere for the quickest updates and recommendations in the new year. So let's see. So we're here for about an hour tonight. And towards the end, we will be taking questions. So if you have any questions, which we super hope that you do, go ahead and leave those in the Q&A box at the bottom. There is also a chat box, which we would love to hear your thoughts, your where you're from, how you heard about the book, just exciting things. We love it when you guys interact with the event. So definitely hop into either one of those, but questions for sure in Q&A so that we can find them. That's important. So without further ado, Tara Moss is an internationally best-selling author, human rights activist, documentary host, and model. Her crime novels have been published in 19 countries in 13 languages, and her memoir, The Fictional Woman, was a #1 international bestseller. She is a UNICEF Goodwill Ambassador, and in 2017, she was recognized as one of the global top 50 diversity figures in public life. Her newest novel, The War Widow, is a female-led noir thriller set in Australia just after World War II. In conversation with her tonight is Gertie Hirsch, the brilliant seamstress behind the pattern line Charm Patterns, super popular fashion blog, Gertie's New Blog for Better Sewing, 5 books, including Gertie Sews Jiffy Dresses, and Gertie's New Book for Better Sewing, and a fantastic YouTube channel, Gertie's World, where just this week she taught us all about petticoats and other undergarments to achieve the vintage silhouette, which I was totally just watching right before this. So thank you guys so much for being here. I am so excited to listen to this conversation. There's fashion, thrills, history. If you guys need anything, give me a shout. I will be listening. I will just be invisible. And the rest of you, I'm going to leave you in their capable hands. Don't forget to put your questions in Q&A, and I will see you soon.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Allie. So Tara, congratulations on your new book.
Thank you. Thanks. It's been like, I just wish we were in the same room, but we are. We're virtually all in the same room, wherever you are right now watching this. We're having a little book chat together.
I feel like we're together.
having a little cup of something together.
Oh yeah, I totally poured Coke Zero into a mug so it would look like I was classy.
That's
So I
good.
look classy.
It's working. Mine is a very late night coffee, which is probably going to be something I regret later. But it feels like a good idea.
Okay, so Tara, we know each other through the sewing world. And we were just saying that it's been 3 years since I was in Australia and you interviewed me when I was doing a little tour of fabric shops out there. And now the tables have turned. And I am so thrilled that you asked me to participate in this.
Well, look, I was really struck, Gertie, by your approach to vintage style and the empowerment that comes with sewing. And I remember interviewing you with that kind of focus in mind because, and this is something that works with Billie Walker as well. In The War Widow, she makes her own clothes, and it is something about independence for her. It's something about being able to move through the world in the way that she needs to for her work as a private investigator. And it's the power of clothes, but it's within her hands. She actually makes it herself. And I love that about you and your books, that you give that power to other people. You teach them how to have that power to create their own clothes. And rather than feeling like their body's wrong and never fits anything, they just, how did you put it? You just change a line on your pattern. You just go, well, this is me. My body does that. And that's how I'm making this. And that is just, I think it's such an empowering and body positive and feminist approach to the independent and important craft of sewing.
Well, it makes so much sense then as something that Billie would do. And I have to say, tonight, as I was getting ready, I was like, what would Billie wear? I was inspired. I was so inspired by her. And you're
wearing your fighting red, because that's,
oh my gosh, we have to talk about that. We have so much to talk about.
We have so many things to talk about.
We do. Okay, let's start by talking about the fact that she sews, though. First, let's just get that out on the table. So you mentioned throughout the book that Billie is a sewer, and you mentioned a couple times that a couple patterns that she sewed from, like you mentioned a McCall's pattern and a Vogue Couturier pattern. And I have to say, as I was reading, I was like Googling patterns from the 40s, trying to guess what they might be based on your descriptions. So as a sewer and a fashion enthusiast, a vintage fashion enthusiast, was it so tempting to just write about what she was wearing on like every page? Did you have to kind of like pull yourself back?
I probably didn't pull myself back enough because there's a lot of fashion in the book. I recently had a piece published in Crime Reads about, I think the headline was why classic film was so obsessed with fashion, why classic novels and crime books are so obsessed with fashion. And that's because for those sleuths, they actually needed to be able to observe what people looked like, and that included what they were wearing. In fact, one of the best indicators for a private inquiry agent, which is what Billie Walker's job is, a PI, if you will, one of their most important jobs is to kind of look at the people around them and know something about them. And you can learn that from the cut of their clothes, the condition that it's in, the quality of their shoes, what kind of timepiece they're wearing. What does it say about me that I'm not wearing one? I don't know. But all those things are clues as to the person, their class and status in society, maybe how they're trying to come across, what they're trying to achieve. And so I wrote about that in Crime Reads because it is an area I think that is so important. And it's not just me, Tara Moss writing about fashion. This goes right back to the hard-boiled tradition. And Raymond Chandler was, very focused with Philip Marlowe on people's clothes. And he described the collar and cut of, every man's garment, the color precisely, it wasn't like purple, it was maroon with a little bit of, it was really specific, and it spoke to things that Philip Marlowe wanted and needed to know and was therefore observing. So yeah, it's tempting to put too much of it in the book, but I feel like the focus that's there really enhances the story and tells a story about each of the characters as they walk into the room.
I noticed that you mentioned shoes a lot too.
Yes.
and especially like the soles of the shoes and what they were made out of. And you kind of connected that back to rationing and what was available at the time, but also in terms of like the noise that someone would make when approaching someone. So if they have crepe shoes, they're very quiet. If it's leather, they're going to be louder. So what, I mean, are you a shoe enthusiast, or was that like a theme?
It was part of the theme of the private investigator and what set them apart, I guess, from other people, in that they had to be so careful about what they put on when they left the house. As you mentioned, fabric soles are very quiet. We take that for granted now because, you know, we can get shoes that are pretty much made of anything we want, any kind of style. But during 1946, when this book was set, the leather was very hard to come by because it had been needed for the men's boots during the war. So leather was very dear and hard to come by, but the leather that was there is going to be very clunky and loud when Billie's sneaking around to you know, to not put it any other way. She has to tail people, and loud shoes are just not going to help. So the fabric soles of the 1940s were actually a great choice for her. But they needed to be the right, you know, the right type of sole and the right type of shoe so that she could come into any establishment and kind of pass as a normal person in that place. But she also had to be able to run, because you never know when you might need that quality in a shoe as well.
I loved that. You had her wear sensible shoes.
Yeah,
I
sensible
appreciated
for
that.
her job, totally. And you know, that's the 40s fashion kind of quirk for me. The thing that draws me to it is that it's gorgeous stuff, but sensible. Like the most outrageously beautiful clothes that people had in that era were actually the robes, because your robe at home could be long and silk and flowing. And if there was a bomb, like an air raid, you might have to run out into the street and be seen by your neighbors in it. So you wanted to have a pretty nice robe, but everything else needed to be kind of higher to keep your legs free. The fabrics couldn't be flowing. They couldn't catch in the machinery at the factory. They had to be a lot more utilitarian. So I just think it's the story behind clothes and the choices are incredibly fascinating. And that, of course, makes its way into this book.
I love that. And also, this is such an interesting year fashion-wise, because it's 1 year before 1947, which is like the iconic fashion year, because that was Christian Dior and the new look. So the very next year, we're going to see a huge shift in the way people dress. So this is sort of an end of an era.
It is. It is, and I think there's a great argument at one point between Billie Walker, the main character, and her mother, Ella von Hooft. And Ella's a bit more traditional with her fashion, and she had been a flapper in the 1920s, and she's very glamorous. And they have a kind of argument, and Ella says to her, you know, what, you don't think I'm fashionable? You with your, you know, your mannish shoulders and your, you know, it was very odd to some women at that time that there were ladies walking around with these masculine shoulder pads and this kind of look. And that was something that was very 1940s. And like you said, it was about to change. So by 1947, there's a shift away from the heavily structured shoulders and that uniform almost look with the suiting, which I still adore.
I know you do.
Something very kind of flamboyantly feminine. And that was a real kind of philosophical moment, a kind of an attempt to turn back, I guess, to a more gendered approach to dressing, that women had to look very, very feminine and men could, well, still wear what they were always wearing, because men's clothing never quite varied as much.
That's true. That's true. Okay, so in addition to clothes, you also talk about lipstick, which is another favorite topic of mine. You mentioned Billie's favorite color is Tussie's Fighting Red, which I'd never heard of before, and it's about to be discontinued, which I can totally relate to because that's happened to me several times. And her favorite perfume, which I'd never heard of, Bandit. And you sent me on a couple like Google rabbit holes because the way you presented the information was so intriguing that I had to know more. So my question here is, what was the research like for things like that iconic lipstick or that perfume?
Look, it was important to me to get all of the details right, and I'm rather obsessed with research. So I have done things like I've been choked unconscious for research, I've been set on fire for research, I've been, I've flown and done loops over the Sydney Opera House with the roulettes and airplanes for research. I've done, been to morgues and seen autopsies, and in this case, researched lipstick very heavily, which was a lot more pleasant task. And this is a good example of what I would call a fighting red, but Tussie's Fighting Red was a real lipstick at the time. And just like in the book, it was being discontinued because the war was over, and some genius in marketing though decided that the new red lipstick with Tussie would be called Jeep Red.
Oh
And
yeah. What is that?
that's bad. That's bad marketing.
It's just
And
bad.
Billy is like, I am not having your Jeep Red. I need to find some more Fighting Red lipstick. But as a lipstick aficionado yourself, and I love seeing you in your Fighting Red, Gertie, you know that it's such an integral part of the way women in the 1940s expressed their femininity at a time when that felt very important to present, to express yourself with, especially when you were in these surrounds that were traditionally very masculine. So they had to wear these very, these suits and things at the factories that were not very flattering. They were actually made for the men, and they just had to kind of put those on and, put a belt on with it and cinch the waist. But they got to have their lipstick, and that was something they didn't stop making during the war, interestingly enough, because they wanted to keep morale up. So the government was even behind like lipstick production in the 1940s. And it's one of the ways women sort of presented themselves or expressed themselves as feminine at a time when that was kind of a real tense conversation, because women were in these roles that were traditionally very masculine, and they were going into careers that were traditionally very masculine. And there was a really live conversation about like women's position in the world, and is a woman still a woman if she works? Like this was a real question at the time. So lipstick was one way that women expressed, that they were still themselves, but now they had fabulous shoulder pads, and they were running newsrooms and factories and things like that. And I really love that about the red lipstick, and its incredible history before then, because of course, once upon a time, if you had red lipstick on, it was quite scandalous. It was, it meant that you were a woman of the night, or you were, in some way, a woman of ill repute for wearing lipstick. So it's got a very interesting history. And I think you can't write about a woman in the 1940s without at least touching on the ways women had to present themselves, and what all those codes were and what they meant.
That's interesting too, because the perfume that you mentioned, Bandit, in my like very cursory research into it, it sounds like it was one of the first perfumes for women that included some more masculine notes. It had sort of like a woody scent to it, which was totally unheard of for women at the time, because it was all florals up till then. So I love that that's the perfume that Billie chose, because she, like you said, she is a very feminine person, but she will also kick your ass. And
oh yeah.
So why do you think she liked Bandit as a perfume? Because I know you have a reason for it.
Oh, of course. It's got a really distinctive leathery scent. And like you said, it was one of the first perfumes that embraced a kind of, it was a less gendered approach to what a woman might, want to smell like, what her personal scent might be. And interestingly, they sent mannequins or models down the runway in 1944 in Paris when they launched this perfume. And they were wearing, like, they're dressed like bandits with, they had knives and masks on and all this, and they're probably fighting red lipstick as well. You can just imagine the scene, and it caused a lot of controversy. It was very provocative. And of course, Billie Walker was there at the launch in 44 in Paris before returning to Sydney, Australia. And that moment kind of was etched into her life, I suppose. And she became kind of attracted to the scent Bandit. And I guess she's part of that generation of women where they would have a scent that was like, they have their lipstick and they have their scent, and they might not have anything else in the world, but they have those two things that kind of help them to feel like themselves. It makes me think of some of the women that inspired Billie Walker. She's based on a lot of research, but some specific women as well. One of them's Nancy Wake, who was, she's one of the most awarded women in World War II. She's since passed on, but she was the most kick-ass woman, this petite woman, New Zealand born, and I think raised in Australia. And she was fighting in France. And they used to say that they would drop her behind enemy lines, and she would have with her favorite silk cushion, I kid you not, her favorite red lipstick, and a pistol. And that was like, that is how she represented, like, these are the things I needed to get by in life. A nice pillow, put my head on at night when I'm in the middle of the forest with all the, the militant fighters of the French resistance, and I need my lipstick to take on the day. And so she was one of the inspirations behind Billie Walker, along with women like Lee Miller, the photographer and war correspondent. And yeah, there's quite a few women I wrote about actually in a piece in Ms. magazine. So if you're interested, check out my website or the link at my Twitter account, and you'll see a few articles I've put out recently. And one of them with Ms. magazine mentions some of those incredible real life heroines from World War II.
Oh, I love that. I will definitely check that out. Okay, so Billie as a character. And by the way, you got a fabulous review in the Boston Herald.
Yes, I was so thrilled with that today.
Congratulations. They gave your book an A.
I know, I like that. I'm like back in school. I hadn't been
Good girl.
given grade A for a while, so that was pretty awesome.
And I felt like they really got the book. They said that it's a feminist twist on film noir.
Yeah.
And that pretty much sums it up for me too, because I felt like, I mean, I don't know what research you did, but I can guess that it involved watching lots of film noir. And it involved thinking about what would a feminist icon look like in this very hard-boiled masculine world.
Exactly. The research was really broad, but one of the things I wanted to do is take some of that popular culture, kind of culture that we all share in our knowledge about the 1940s kind of storytelling. So what do we think of when we think of 1940s? We probably think of war films about generally male soldiers. And we also think about Philip Marlowe. We think about Dashiell Hammett's, the Maltese Falcon. We think of like Humphrey Bogart and some of these amazing femme fatales that featured in the films. And I love my femme fatales. They're marvelous. Like, bring me an Ava Gardner or Lauren Bacall any day. But what I wanted to do was to take the traditions of the hard-boiled genre of that era and the traditions of film noir of that era, because I love them, and subvert them and focus the attention on the women instead, make them the ones who push the story forward, make them the ones that save the characters at the end of the day and solve the mystery. Not because that would be a crazy thing to do, but because that's actually what women did as well. But we haven't told those stories. They're not part of the same mythos or cultural storytelling as these sort of grizzled male PIs that we're used to seeing. So there were female PIs in 1946. It's extremely hard to find contemporary literature from that time that writes about them, though. It's taken kind of till the 80s or 90s to see female PIs, I think, popularized in books, and those were usually contemporary to that time. And if we want to wind it back, there's only Gail Gallagher, for example, is one PI female character who's like, the books came out in 1946, 1947. She was a PI in the US in those books. And that was a male-female writing team calling themselves Gail Gallagher. That is so far the only female character that I've found who is a professional private investigator of that era. And yet when I did the research, I found that there were women working in that field. Yes, they were outnumbered. Yes, it's a male-dominated field, but so were so many at that time. And I just feel like those stories are fascinating. And I wanted to create a woman who encapsulated some of the amazing real people of the time, and those stories that are just either undertold or untold, that are about everyday people, or about, you know, the post-war period, the long shadow of war, as opposed to the stuff we usually focus on, which is the, you know, the politicians and the generals and the front lines. I want to look at how people in the communities coped. I want to look at how it impacted regular citizens, and particularly women who we haven't heard from.
Well, you know, it's interesting too what you were saying earlier about women sort of fighting at this time to understand their place in society, because they had filled in for men in factories, they'd gone to work, you know, when they needed to, and now the men were back and they were sort of struggling to understand their place in the world.
Yeah.
And I think Billie was a good example of that, because she doesn't seem totally sure if she should be doing what she's doing. Like, she does have moments where she's like, is this ridiculous? Like, is this really dangerous? Like, should I just become a police officer? And that's the other thing I wanted to talk about too, was, you know, they do kind of try to recruit her for the police force, but you touch on some really interesting women's issues in the police force in Sydney at this time. So I was hoping you could share that with us.
Yeah, look, I'm going to read just a very quick section of The War Widow, not like a reading per se, but to touch on some of those issues. Throughout The War Widow, what I've tried to do is give the greater context of what these characters are dealing with. And so that includes women's experiences of gender inequality. It includes what people with disabilities are going through, what people of different racial groups are going through, and what immigrants are experiencing at that time. And in this section, we hear about, women in the police force. So Billie's rolling her eyes because some young man has said, oh, are you a cop, you know? And she said, she's thinking, in 41, when the panic set in about the lack of able men, the New South Wales police force had added 6 women officers to the force, bringing the grand total to a mere 14 in the state. But now Premier McKell had approved an increase in the number of female cops to 36, and the papers were going mad with the idea, as if the fairer sex might suddenly take over the entire force, leaving men out of work, or even, heaven forbid, waiting for their dinners, despite the fact that married women weren't being accepted anyhow. Billie was on a first name basis with the famous Special Sergeant First Class Lillian Armfield, who had joined the force in 1915, and through her knew well enough the struggle. The female recruits hadn't even uniforms and weren't paid overtime like the men, nor were they entitled to a pension. They had to sign contracts stating that they wouldn't be compensated for any injuries suffered in the line of duty, couldn't join the police association, and had to resign if they married, one of the reasons Lillian never had. With all that, it was a wonder so many women were keen to sign up, but the applications always by far outnumbered the spaces allotted. So you imagine signing up and you can't be compensated for any injuries. You're not going to get a pension. In Australia, it's called superannuation. So there was no pension, no retirement fund. The men got that, but not the women. You couldn't have a uniform. Women were also not given sidearms, you'll be unsurprised to hear. And this was the environment for them at work. And this was the choice they had to make. If they met someone and wanted to get married, they were sent home, thank you very much. And that's the context in 1946 for this whole book and the experiences of the women in it.
Yeah, I love that part. I also love that you explained Billie as a character so well, like why she does what she does and why she doesn't opt for a safer like desk job, because she loves what she loves what she does. And you talk about that thrill she has when she's starting a new case. And I love that when you described her as coming alive when she was starting to see the pieces come together in this new case. And I related to her so much. I was like, I get this woman. I know why she does this. So I love that. And I love that you had different types of women in this book too. You know, a lot, like the character of Shyla, I think was really timely this year, like reading it from the lens of late 2020. You know, Shyla is an Aboriginal character, and she describes her fear of the police or getting the police involved. And it really, I mean, for me, it touched on a lot of what has been happening in the US in 2020. So Can you talk a little bit about that character and the inspiration for it?
Yes. Look, this book has as a theme running through it, um, looking at inequality, social injustice and inequality. And of course, World War II, you need to be able to touch on that because human rights abuses and inequality were such a big part of what happened. The Holocaust could not have happened without this sort of social inequality. And I couldn't touch on those issues setting a book in Australia without talking about the plight of the Aboriginal people in that country, and particularly for me, the Aboriginal women. And so Shyla was, as a character, she's a Wiradjuri woman. She was a way to kind of touch on and explore that aspect. No, she hadn't been on the front lines during the war. They had been still battling their own war in Australia against the white authorities. And those very difficult relations and those abuses of power were still happening. And of course, now, unfortunately, are still, happening today. And I think overall, the social justice issues in the book, they resonate because these issues have not disappeared. We have to say Black Lives Matter because we see statistically that so many actually don't believe they do. We have to continue our advocacy in that regard. And same with all of these different groups of people that I discuss in The War Widow. You have inequalities across issues like disability, race, different cultural groups, and that, bigotry that is dangerous. It costs lives. I mean, that you could not have had World War II and the Holocaust if people hadn't convinced others that Jewish people were worth less, or all the other people that they rounded up. So you were, a gypsy or disabled or any other category where they decided, you're under Untermenschen, you were under human and therefore needed to be taken away or killed. The World War II, it's such a huge part of that story, and I needed to explore that within the context of Australia, where I chose to set this particular book as well. And Shyla is a marvelous character, and I don't want to give away too much, but I will say that it was important to me as an author to make sure that she was the hero of her own subplot. And I feel really good about how that worked. And in fact, when this book was first launched in Australia, Professor Larissa Barrett, who's an amazing Aboriginal lawyer and academic, she launched the book for me, which was a real honor. And it was great to see that, some of those really difficult storylines had kind of landed had landed well and were being received in the spirit in which I wrote them. And as a writer, of course, when you're dealing with such sensitive topics as inequality and racism, you really want to do your best to get it right.
I love it. You did a fabulous job. I agree. And that character was extremely empowered. I know the scene you're talking about, and I loved it, but I won't give it away.
I want to say so much more, but
I know.
Shyla is incredible. I'm writing book 2 at the moment, and I love being in those characters' worlds again, and just like spending my day with Shyla and Sam and Billie and Ella and all of them.
Okay, wait, hold on. You just dropped big news for me. You're working on book 2 now.
I'm working on my second Billie Walker book. So yes. And it is 1947. And so you touched on New Look, of course. Yes, there's going to be a little bit of that, of course.
Oh, this excites me, of course.
Yeah.
Okay, so another thing I noticed was that so there are a few men in this book that could be considered love interests for Billie. We know that she has a past, and we know that she has, can I give away why she's a war widow? Why it's called?
Of course.
Okay, I don't want to give any spoilers. So
you know what to leave out, but yeah, you can certainly give away that part. Absolutely.
Okay, so we know that she was married to the dashing Jack, and they spent some time together in Vienna, and she was madly in love with this man, and now he's sort of long lost. They became separated during the war. And so she's back. She hasn't seen him in 2 years. And there are a couple men in her life who she has some very exciting chemistry with, particularly her assistant, I felt. But none of this materialized. So you kind of kept us waiting. for
Just a little bit. Guilty as charged, Gertie. Guilty as charged. It is 1946 in The War Widow, and Billie, I guess there had to be some, I think the tension probably makes sense because she's technically married, but assumed to be a widow, a war widow. And she hasn't quite let go of that yet, but she's also an amazing kick-ass woman. And she's been very, very cleverly has surrounded herself with some pretty fabulous guys. In fact, Sam Baker, her assistant, who's a war vet and has this marvelous leather glove that he wears over his injured hand. I mean, the injured hand matters because it's probably why he's working for her. Otherwise, he'd still be in an army job, but they've decided he's not able-bodied, so thanks very much, go home. He's working for her and they have this marvelous chemistry. And he was one of those characters that was going to be a pretty small character at the beginning, but he was not happy to be one-dimensional. He just started to grow and grow, and their chemistry was very organic. So yeah, she has this wonderful chemistry with him, also with Hank Cooper, I think, the DI, the detective inspector. And yes, there might be some other characters in the next book as well. We'll just see where things go for her. But yeah, it's a tension that can't be strung out forever. She's human, and she's gonna at some point eventually need to, yes.
Well, I'm rooting for Sam.
I'll just leave that there.
Okay. All right. I think Sam's the one for her though.
He's pretty fabulous. I love the dance scene at the dancers between Sam and Billie. It was a real pleasure to write and to research because I had to do a little bit of dancing for that myself. So
oh, fun. Okay, so I think we should go to questions.
Great.
How do you feel about that? You ready?
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much for this conversation, Gertie. And
oh my gosh, I feel like I could do this for hours. It's like, this is hard.
This is so much.
I don't want to stop. But I'll have to let the other girls have a chance to ask you some questions, or boys. There may be some gentlemen here. Lauren Johnson, I'd love to know what both of your favorite lipsticks are. That's an excellent question.
That is a great question. There's one called True Story by 12 Blueprints, which I really like. 12 Blueprints is a kind of a niche company that's about color theory. So that's one that works on me because apparently I'm a dark winter. Previously thought I was a soft summer. Guess what? I'm not. I'm a dark winter. I also am a big fan of Ruby Woo, because how could you not be? From MAC, that's a classic. And honestly, I'm always finding new reds that I love. So it changes for me all the time. What about you? What's your red tonight? What are you wearing?
Okay, what I'm wearing tonight is by Dose of Colors. And the color is called Kiss of Fire. And I discovered this lipstick last year, and it's the only one I wear pretty much now. I'm addicted to it. It is so dimensional. If you saw me in person, you would probably say I was wearing like a fuchsia lipstick, because in certain lights, it reads very pink, and I like a pink red. But on camera, it reads very blue red. So it hits all the right notes for me.
It looks amazing.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it's Billie Walker. It could be Fighting Red. I'm going to decide as the author that is the current Fighting Red. Whatever they want to call it, it's Fighting Red.
Oh, I love that, because that's a better name than Kiss of Fire. So
Kiss of Fire is also pretty good, but Fighting Red, that's what I'm seeing.
I mean, that wins. Okay, question for Tara. It is obvious by the wonderful detail, this is from Jasmine, by the way. It's obvious by the wonderful detail how much you research your books. Was there any interesting little facts you uncovered while researching for The War Widow that did not end up in the book? Ooh, I like how you think, Jasmine.
Yeah, there are so many things. At the moment, I'm still just floored by the stories of the women who were very much like Billie. So during the war, Billie was a war reporter, and her husband, Jack, was taking the photographs, and she was sort of writing the words, and they were trying to turn the tides with respect to, say, the US and their view of the war and getting involved in the war efforts. So that kept bringing me back to Lee Miller, one of my favorite women, iconic women of the past. And the thing that just floored me was that she was taking photographs for the US Army, but as a stipulation of her doing work for them, she was, because she's female, not allowed to cover conflict. So she was a war photographer who wasn't allowed to photograph war, okay? So absorb that for a moment. And there was one incident, I think it was in 44, I think, and she happened to be the only photographer there when this battle broke out. So of course she did her job and took incredible photographs of the conflict. And then she was arrested by the US Army for having done that because she's a woman. So that blew my mind, Jasmine. And that was one of the, many details that I didn't add into the book, but it would be the kind of thing that Billie would be steamed up about, of course, because it's outrageous. Yeah, the research it's like a rabbit hole I could go down forever.
Oh my gosh. Next time we need to do like a slideshow. I want to see all your vintage pattern research for this book.
Yes, I have such a huge folder of vintage fashion for this, and even like trying to get the shoes right, like her stacked Oxfords, and it's delicious.
I love it. Okay, thank you, Jasmine. All right, we have one from Vicky.
Hi, Vicky.
Vicky says, thank you, Tara, for creating such a fabulous role model of a woman in the character of Billie Walker. How important is it to you personally to have these sorts of women profiled to set good examples for the next generation of young ladies to follow or be aware of so that they know they can achieve whatever they set their minds to?
That's a wonderful question. I didn't realize I was doing this early in my career when I started writing, but I now recognize 21 years in, 22 years into my career as of this year, that I'm dedicating my life to centering women and girls in fiction and nonfiction storytelling. That's what I do. And that's what I found myself doing very organically. It's where my interest lies. I don't necessarily want to create them as role models. It's great if people find that when they're reading and they think like, this woman makes me feel like I can do things, I can get through, I can survive things. I'm resilient, Of course, I want people to feel that way, but it's not necessarily how I'm writing them. I want them to make mistakes as well and to be flawed. And I think that's very much true for like Mac Vanderwall from my crime series, Billie Walker, and also Pandora English in my paranormal series. They're all flawed characters. They do make mistakes. They do get in, they have trouble, as Billie says at some point in the book, her and Trouble know each other pretty well, right? But it's that resilience, it's that getting through to the other side and keeping on going when things are hard, when you fail, or when you mess something up. I think that's the important element that probably people can take away from this, that you're stronger than you know. And when I'm reading Billie and immersed in her world, that's what I get from her. She makes mistakes in this book, and even by Shyla, she makes mistakes by Shyla, and there's some tension there. But she ultimately keeps going, and she's resilient, and she tries to improve the world for people who for whom things are very tough. And she's flawed. She doesn't always get it right. And also she's not a saint. She wants to make a living. She wants to have it all, all that stuff that we all, struggle with. So yeah, I think it's wonderful that you're connecting with her character. Thank you, Vicky.
I love that. Thank you. Okay. Lauren asks, do you have an idea of how many books will be in the series, or are you winging it and just seeing where they take you?
A little bit of both, Lauren. Thank you for your question. I'm very happy to say that I've signed on for 3 Billie Walker books, which is wonderful. So the Canadian publishers, HarperCollins, have jumped on board for a third. Dutton, who have published this gorgeous edition, are definitely up for the next one as well. And hopefully I can talk them into number 3 when that's ready. So there'll be at least 3 Billie Walker stories. I would like to see more, and I guess the winging it part is really about adapting and observing. And if readers are loving these stories and there's more to tell, I will write those books. And I would like that to be the case. I think that will be the case, but I will certainly listen to readers. And if they feel like, you know, the story's over, and if I feel in my writer's heart that Billie has had her character arc, then I'll stop it there. I doubt it though. I think there'll be a few more Billie Walker tales to come. And like I mentioned before, I'm writing the second one now.
Okay. Okay. So Lauren has another question, and it's a follow-up, and I'm going to ask it because I want to know too. The question is also, is Jack officially gone, or are you setting up something for the future? Tell us.
I'm not good at a poker face, so I'm going to cover my face. I'm covering my face because I'm not good at poker face. I can't answer that question, which is probably an answer already. So I'm just gonna.
Okay.
Say no comment. I can't say anything.
Noted.
So we'll see. We'll just have to see.
We'll see. We'll see. I love that. Okay.
You can see why I was never an actor. I just cannot. I don't do poker face at all.
I can't either. I give away everything I'm working on anytime someone asks me, so I totally understand. Okay, from Tracy and Charlie in Australia.
Hello.
Okay, so they say you've moved through the lives of, and I don't know how to pronounce this character's name,
McHady. So Mac Vanderwaal's a contemporary crime series heroine. She was actually my first heroine, and Pandora English, she's my paranormal heroine.
Okay, so they say you've moved through the lives of McHady Vanderwaal to Pandora English and now Billie Walker. They're all very different characters, but they do share similarities. Do you see them as connected when you're writing Billie?
That's a great question, Tracy and Charlie. I feel like we're all part of the same girl gang. In fact, I'd be willing to guess that Gertie, you'd be happy to be part of that girl gang. And most of the people here that are tuning in are probably going to be happy to hang out at the bar with Billie and Pandora and Mac, if we could all get together in our various eras, because we're all in different, not just time zones, but completely different decades. I think that there are common themes, but I hope that each of those characters and their journeys feel different, that there's a sense of them being complete and whole characters. Certainly their circumstances are different, but there's no doubt that when you read a Tara Moss novel, you're going to find women who absolutely kick ass. Like I'm not going to write a book where a woman does not kick ass. I'm sorry, I'm just not going to do that. It's like, sorry. If my publishers are watching right now, obviously, you know what to expect. The women are going to kick a lot of ass. And it's because as a reader, that's also what I want to read and what I can't find enough of, And I love all the stories out there of men that absolutely kicking butt. And there's so many of them that I could list that I just love from popular culture and popular literature. But I want more women. I want their stories to be told. I want them to be diverse and interesting and resilient. And I want them to survive and thrive. And I want to read that. And yeah, I want them to go through tough things and to be realistic. They're not, Wonder Woman, although she's also amazing. They're not Wonder Woman. They're not perfect. But they have strength and they have resilience, and that's really what I love about writing those characters. I think that's the common thread between those three different series characters.
You know what I like that you did with Billie, that I think a lot of people miss when they're trying to write strong women characters, is they try to write Wonder Woman, right? This woman who can do everything by herself, who never needs help, and can just take care of any problem on her own. And that's what a strong woman is in popular culture sometimes. But what I like about Billie is that she knows when to ask for help and she knows who to ask for help. And that is part of her strength. And you don't see that a lot with women. We're supposed to be so independent, if we're independent, that we would never need help from anyone. And that's just unrealistic. So
I think having a ensemble cast is actually really rewarding as a writer and as a reader. So yes, it's Billie, she's front and center in this book and she, runs the show, but where would she be without her amazing mom and, Ella and Alma and their wonderful chemistry and their arguments and their kind of, I love her mom. I love the chemistry. And Sam, her incredible assistant / secretary, yes, I had to make a gorgeous male secretary for her. Looks like Alan Ladd, and
Obviously.
you know, obviously, but that was also, so that was a fun thing to do. Yes, it's a sort of a gender switch, but it's also realistic because he would have been out of work after the war because of his disability. And that's, so there's ways to do this as an author with, I think, a fresh perspective, staying within authenticity, but also giving people as readers something they're not finding. Like, that's why I want to read books like this. I want to see that different perspective. And yeah, the characters still have to feel real. So you can't have them be Wonder Woman. When I want Wonder Woman, I want Wonder Woman. But
Right.
you know, the rest of us, we do have to have our flaws and get it wrong sometimes. And yeah, have a bit of a team of amazing girl gang friends to help us get through.
Exactly. And I love that she goes to her mom immediately when she has like a really big problem. She's like, this is one for mom.
Oh, that's right. Hello, good morning. Wake up, everyone. There's a big problem here.
Okay. So Bonnie Stern, I know Bonnie. Hi, Bonnie. Says,
Love this.
Gertie, you have a war widow at the funeral look going on. Oh, this whole thing?
I love that. I love that. I needed a veil with mine. I don't know if you've even been able to see that.
We're both wearing veils?
I don't have a veil, but I have also the kind of a similar sort of a hat going on, but I think it's kind of been disappearing off the top of this. The colors of your feathers.
Oh.
So.
Well, like I said, you also paid a lot of attention to the hats in the book. So I felt it was appropriate to wear tonight.
Indeed.
And you mentioned tilt hats a lot and veiling. And so I felt like it was appropriate.
Are you wearing any hat pins? Because you know, after reading The War Widow, you know, they're quite handy as well.
I've been thinking about hat pins since that scene. And no, I'm not. But it did make me think like I should have hat pins handy, not only for my hats, but as a weapon, perhaps.
Yeah. You need shoes you can run in, and you need a couple of handy hat pins, and then you can get through just about anything.
Very sharp hat pins. Yes.
Yes. I love that.
But that's not the question.
Funeral. I love it.
She also says, Tara, thanks for having this Zoom event. I miss going to author events at my local bookstore. It's always interesting to hear how a book was researched and came together. I can't wait to read this. It's next in my queue.
Oh, I love hearing that.
So sweet. Thank you, Bonnie. Yeah, I feel like I haven't been to a Zoom book event somehow in this pandemic. So this is like feeding me right now.
I've had such a strange, I want to say year. We're out of 2020. Thank goodness. Everybody can just relax because we're out of 2020. Apparently, we can't quite relax because events are still unfolding, folks. And again, bringing me back a little too much to the 1940s, more than I'd like to. We think we've left fascism behind, and there it rears its head again. But we got through 2020, but the weird thing for me with 2020 was that I did several virtual book tours, and it was really strange. So as an author, I had all of these kind of milestones where I had new books out, and then I wasn't able to go on tour. And it was a very strange year. I really miss being able to shake people's hands and talk about the book in, you know, face to face. So I really appreciate events like this in Third Place Books and what they've done, bringing us together so we can have these conversations and we can, you know, keep it going. Because I think that book community is just incredibly important. We can't let it go, even in a pandemic, and with everything going on in the world, we've got to hold on to community.
So true. Okay, one last question.
Oh,
it's a fashion question, so I feel like this is good because it's going to kind of like bookend our conversation.
Yeah, very nice, very nice.
This is from Emily. So Emily asks, do you think that fashion is playing the same kind of role today as it was in Billie Walker's time?
I don't think it is. I think there's a few key differences. One key difference, of course, is fast fashion. And I've written a bit about this in, you know, my kind of role of looking at sustainability issues, because I'm very big, obviously, on style and clothes and vintage style. But the fashion industry I see as something a little bit different. I think I like that about what you do, Gertie, as well. you encourage people to make things that are timeless and beautiful. And when you take the time to make a garment for yourself that fits you, you're going to get a lot of use out of that. You're not going to just chuck it in a bin after a couple of wears, right? And fast fashion, of course, is designed for precisely that you chuck it out. So that's one very big difference between fashion 1946 and fashion today. Of course, they still had rationing in place in 46 with a number of issues, and that included a lot of the fabrics people were able to get hold of. I mean, when New Look hit in 1947, it was scandalous in some ways because the skirts were full, and so there was all this extra fabric, and that was kind of unpatriotic to use fabric. You know, that was this real big change. Of course, that was embraced, and it became this huge feminine kind of fashion silhouette and moment. But it was scandalous because it was like, oh, we're really not doing the big shoulder pads and the really careful use of fabric now. Now we're being flamboyant. So it's very different to that time in a few ways, but make, do, and mend was still very much in place in the 40s. And it's something that I really appreciate, and I know you do as well, Gertie, that you, I should call you Gretchen. I just keep thinking of you as Gertie. I don't know which you prefer.
I truly answer to both. Yes, please, whichever.
Okay. What I like as well is that when you learn to sew, and you can think of the sewing needle as the first really important invention. When you learn to sew, you're learning to put, sew that button on or save that garment and get a lot more wear and use out of it. And I think that the fact that many of us can no longer do that, we don't have those skills anymore, and that we have fast fashion everywhere around us. And, I'm no saint with that either, means that the context of fashion and also our association with garments is incredibly different now to what it was for Billie Walker in that era.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the fast fashion thing, but also I feel like there's such an emphasis on comfort today,
Of course.
like to the extreme that it is so foreign to us what someone like Billie Walker would have gone through just to get dressed. And you really did a good job of saying all the clips she had to do, like her garters, and, she had to get her seams straight, and, her French knickers, or whatever, all the layers that went into someone who ostensibly was pretty practical in her dress because she has a very physical job to do. So it's just thinking of what modern women today will not stand for, and like comfort rules how we dress. And I mean, on one hand, comfort is a great thing. On the other hand, have we gone too far?
Yeah. Look, I think it's interesting because comfort is so relative. And I know for me, I actually don't feel that great in sweatpants. Like I don't feel like myself after a while. And I don't wear makeup every day, but I know that when I put on my lipstick, I put on my fighting red, that I feel different in a way that I really like. Like I feel like I'm ready for the world. It gives me a kind of armor. In fact, through some of my humanitarian work, I've done a lot of work with UNICEF, and I was out in the field at one point in the Middle East, and I wear red lipstick. It was like I had a backpack with me with a t-shirt and jeans, and like there was lipstick. That was, like how I kept going, a bit like the women in the 1940s. And yeah, literally, I didn't have the silk clicker, so I should have listened to Nancy Wake on that. But they all introduced me to this one woman, and she was like, her nickname was to do with her red lips, because she had been in this work with refugees for decades and decades, and she always wore red lipstick, and it was like her totem or her like protection amulet was red lipstick. And I think sometimes by making things very, very casual, we forget the power of the things we put next to our bodies, with the connection between our bodies and our spirit, if you will, or our personality, our minds. So there's something for Billie about when she gets dressed, she's ready for a particular mission. And if she was doing that in jeans every day, I don't know that she would do her job the same. Like she just would not be the same person. So there's definitely constraints, and I'm not saying I want to go back to the 1940s in terms of the conservatism and what, I'm like vintage style, not vintage values. Thank you very much. but yes. But in terms of what we can learn about dressing for ourselves, I think there's actually some great stuff in The War Widow. Just looking at like the simple pleasures of, hey, I feel a little bit more myself because I'm putting on my fighting red lipstick, or I feel a little bit more myself with this, you know, special bracelet. I actually brought this one out and didn't talk about it, but this was made by a soldier during World War II for his sweetheart. It's since, you know, ended up in some thrift shop and I found it. And it's made from coins and it's for Helen from Arlo. And I'm just thinking of the almost magical quality of a bracelet like that with all of that love and intention put into it, made by what was available at the time, what he could get hold of for materials, and brought home or sent across the world, and just the specialness of that. And I guess I want to make sure that in my life each day, I have few things, but that I really value those and I feel special in them, because I think that that's a form of, you know, supporting myself and my own needs. And it's totally different for everyone. Some people are going to just hate the red lipstick or hate putting on a jacket or even a bra. But for me, the things that I wear are often supporting me and my needs. And that's the pleasure that I get to have in 2021. No one gets to tell me what to wear.
Well, I mean, it's a good reminder. I mean, especially after 2020, when I definitely fell trapped to sweatpants every day and not wearing my lipstick because it got smudged under my mask or whatever it was. I definitely had days where I was like, I give up. Like, I just can't. I can't.
Yeah.
And that's fine. You know, but I think there is something to be said about what is the power of when you put on your fighting red or when you put on that fabulous dress and you really, you feel yourself, as they say, you're feeling fabulous. And I like that message from Billie Walker.
I like it too, and I like that it's very social, because you're dressing to also to speak through your clothes to other people. And that's an incredibly kind of social activity in a way. So that's why, you know, not everyone's going to be like this. And certainly it's no secret, but I'm really interested in how people choose to express themselves. And I love the full gamut of what people choose to do. Like, I adore it. Like, show me who you are, like, go for it. And I like being around people who express themselves and do that through their art or their presentation or their choices. And I think that freedom is incredibly important. And it's a freedom that they didn't have in the 1940s. And so for them, it's like, you know, just those little things they could do to feel like themselves in these incredibly constrained times, I think was very important for the people of that era.
I love that. Well, on that note, this has been fabulous.
That has been so fabulous. Thank you. Thank you, Gertie. That's just been such a delight.
Oh my goodness. Thank you. And congrats on this wonderful book. And everyone, if you haven't read it, read it now.
I'm so excited to have this out, and it's just a beauty. So thank you, Dutton Books. Thank you, Third Place Books, for hosting us. Thank you so much, Gretchen. You're a superstar, and I'm just so thrilled that you're on board tonight, and it's been a real pleasure. Thanks for everyone tuning in and having this conversation.
Yes.
Yes, thank you all the way around. Thank you guys all so much for being here. This was a wonderful discussion. I was hanging on to every word in my little black box over here. Everyone in the comments, we miss you too. Come on in. There are links in the description for all of the books. So go ahead, hit those up. If you want a signed copy, do it online, and we'll get those in the mail as quickly as we can. And thank you, everyone. Yay. Thank you and good night.
Thank you and good night. And find me online if you have any questions. Thank you for supporting Third Place Books. Thank you for supporting authors. Thank you for supporting sewists. Do you use that term, sewist? Oh, yeah. Because sewist looks so bad when you write it. I just go.
Yeah, we don't like sewer. We like sewist.
So thank you for supporting creatives. We love you and have a wonderful night.
Good night, everyone.